Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We are going to do a deep dive on chess and AI with a brilliant guest who I am excited to introduce. But first, as always, wanted to thank our sponsors, Chessable.com. So regular listeners probably know I have a list of all my favorite books on the Perpetual Chess website, and one of them is Judith Polgar's trilogy From Quality Chess, How I Beat Fischer's Record, being my favorite and being the first, tracing her childhood where she beat Bobby Fischer's record of the youngest grandmaster at the time. It's filled with great stories as well as brilliant chess, and now it's on Chessable. Judith actually did the video. I'm sure the video in particular is amazing because Judith's such a good storyteller with such an incredible memory of all of her feats. So that is one of the many things you can check out. And of course, if you sign up for Chessable Pro, please use the link in the description. As for our guest this week, so he is a Sweden-based avid chess player with a FIDE rating of 1882. But more importantly, for the purposes of our conversation, he has a computer science degree with a master's in interactive design. He's also a former engineer at Google and a computer scientist and founder of a chess AI startup and app called NoctieAI. He's been working full-time on Noctie for 3 years now. The idea of NoctieAI is human-like bots with a really cool interface and a lot of fun features that we will be discussing in due time. But first and foremost, I am excited to welcome to the program Samuel Sonig. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you, Ben. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat. I mean, conversations about AI obviously are everywhere. And here in chess, of course, this is old hat for us, but nonetheless, the technology keeps advancing. And I know that you've had a fascination with it since your early years. But my first question, actually, Samuel, I just wanted to talk about your approach to chess. So you, in an interview with the Flame of Reason podcast, you mentioned that when you really got serious about your chess game was when you had a commute into Stockholm when you were working for Google at the time. Suddenly it freed up some time to work on your game. And I was curious how you spent that chess time.
So I didn't spend it in the best way, like in retrospect. My typical, chess session, which would be 3 or 4 hours, would be I would start out just doing some tactics. I would start out like playing rapid games, and then I would very quickly become tilted when I lost and, go to shorter time controls. And then I would probably spend the last hour playing bullet games.
The worst approach.
Yeah, that's the worst approach. So I think like the tactics training probably helped me, and maybe my positional understanding was helped by playing a lot of games. But in terms of kind of rating jumps, I think those have mainly been in like short periods when I did something a bit different from this, which is one of the things that like found the most impactful. I was to, old school, just review games between masters, just no annotations, anything. I just reviewed them. And then I tried to replay them from memory.
Oh, wow.
And then before I went to sleep, I would like lie down with closed eyes and I would try to replay the notation like in my mind. So I did that like maybe 2-3 weeks when I did that every night. And like after that was the first time I was able to play a blindfold game. And I also I just gained ELO, So I'm looking forward to like the next time I will have a lot of time to put on chess, because like thinking about this in retrospect and also working with chess and chess learning with Noctie, I have some new ideas about how I should structure my training.
So it sounds like the answer is a lot, but what would you do differently?
I would definitely focus a lot on reviewing master games. Like I've always found that reviewing my own games, which is kind of the established thing, for me, I don't really feel that I'm being productive. I don't really feel that I'm learning something. I don't feel like this mass solving tactics really help me either. Whereas sometimes when I have found a really beautiful tactic, it's kind of etched into my mind. And then I can see it in every game. Like, the opera game. I can always see like when that tactics happen. So I'm kind of, I like the approach of kind of deep learning, like rather than quantity learning.
That's interesting, though, that your focus is on other people's games, because we've had other guests and, obviously the way it works in chess improvement, this is kind of what my book is about. You can get two people with totally opposite perspectives, practically every week. But for example, an adult in his 40s, another computer engineer, Dan Bach, a guy I interviewed, he was adamant that part of the reason he made a breakthrough was because he was reviewing his own mistakes. And I know that NoctieAI, a part of its capability is to automatically provide flashcards from the mistakes that you make. So it's interesting to then hear you say that you actually found, or at least what draws you in more, is master games, because that I feel like is becoming more unusual. Do you think that that's actually optimizing your learning or just optimizing your interest, which of course ties into learning, because if you're not interested, you're not going to do it?
I do think that a big issue nowadays for people learning chess is you have this really short attention span. Mm-hmm. So you tend to do the things that are easiest to do. But if you look at like people who take Morphy, for example, like he didn't solve 10,000 tactics or play like thousands. He barely had anyone to play with because he was so above everyone else level. But what he probably did do is like, whenever he made a mistake, he was thinking about it all the time, and like putting pieces back and forth. He probably read about every game that someone else played and so on. And you take someone like Magnus Carlsen, who can recall like almost every master game. And like when there's a new variation, it's like, oh, this was played like 8 years ago between Caruana and yeah. And this kind of memory, I think, really builds the chess intuition. I have tried to, obviously, I still believe in solving tactics, fixing mistakes from your games and so on. But a lot of what I've tried to do with Noctie is kind of fix the issues that I had, which is that I had this short attention span. I was solving puzzles that weren't really obviously relevant to me. So that's why in Noctie, like the focus on solving tactics is tactics that you actually miss this pattern. So it makes a lot more sense for me to only solve those things that are actual mistakes from your games. And the other thing is that I'm very competitive. So when I play online, I easily get like, I just want to win. I want to go on to the next game and win. So I don't really have this tranquility to really review the game. And that's also one thing that I've tried to improve with Noctie, that you're kind of getting this assisted review where you can focus on the things that are actually useful.
Yeah, one of the differentiating factors of Noctie for listeners not familiar is it gives immediate feedback to the moves, at least as the default setting. So if you make a brilliant move, it doesn't tell you after the game, it tells you right then. Or a terrible move, same thing, which is, it's got pros and cons, obviously. But so could you speak a little more about what the governing philosophy behind approaching it that way was?
Sure. So there's two parts. One is the science around deliberate practice, like all these books that have been written about how people get good at stuff like playing an instrument and so on. And it's really coupled to this feedback loop of practicing something specific. Like I'm trying to improve this aspect. For chess, it could be I'm trying to learn this opening or this tactical pattern or whatever. And then getting quick feedback. And like the number of kind of useful feedback iterations you get kind of accelerates your learning. And one reason why I haven't really stuck with doing reviews on my own games is that for me, and this may differ for other people, but for me, after the game, especially after blitz games or online games, I don't really care about the game enough to really connect what I'm reviewing to, like, my brain doesn't care because I've already moved on. And like looking at studies, even taking something, let's say you would play the piano and you hit the wrong note, then you kind of get this error signal instantly to your brain.
Yeah,
so it adapts automatically. But let's say that you added a 10-second delay to kind of hearing that. I think that would really slow down the learning process. Like, let's say that you would play the entire piece and afterwards someone would say, you hit the wrong note here and here and here. That's really difficult to really get something happening in your brain. Whereas if you have this really quick, like sub 100 millisecond feedback loop, then you're kind of learning automatically. You're learning this pattern recognition automatically. And I actually just tried adding the review colors from Noctie. I just made them live because we have that data already when you make the move. And what really made it into a feature was that I was just struck immediately by how strong it felt. Like I would play a few games with this instant feedback on, and like my next long game, my next classical game at the club, I was going to make a move And I just felt that this is probably a bad move. Like I can just feel it. I can
feel
just
the
feel
question
that.
mark coming.
Yeah. And I get a bit of hesitation before I make the move, and then okay, I need to calculate. And that's, I think, obviously you need to learn all the tactical patterns. You need to learn to calculate. But I think this approach really helps develop this intuitive feel of what moves look good and what moves look bad. And I think that's a really important cornerstone.
Right, and of course, since NoctieAI is built around playing against bots, it's not cheating. You know, there would be something weird if you were playing someone against another person and they immediately tell you your move is brilliant. You know, but you don't have to worry about that, and that's a first world problem anyway. Our brilliant moves don't come along that often. But Sam, I wanted to return to what you mentioned about working on your visualization by replaying games. So first of all, I was curious, like, I've heard a bit of your chess background. I know you played with your dad, but couldn't get anyone to play. I had a similar story when I was a kid, and then eventually got into chess more seriously. But when did you start tournament chess?
Like three years ago.
Oh, wow. And you're already 1,900 feet. Hey, that's incredible.
Well, I was helped by this, this rating.
Right, yeah, which does, So subtract 200 points, I guess, give or take. That's still pretty rare.
I haven't played a lot of tournaments. I've played like maybe 3 or 4 tournaments at the club, and then I played one open, local open tournament. Okay. So it's not like I have this super long progress, but I've definitely been performing. Like my last tournament, I was performing above my rating. So I think I'm on the right track if I would just play a bit more. So.
And before you started playing tournaments, had you done serious chess work?
Well, I did like 5-6 years ago. I had this period, when I worked at Google. I think that's the most serious in the sense that I was actually solving tactics. I was playing a lot. I was reading book like Silman Endgame course, that kind of stuff. Same thing there, really. I think like books hold a lot of potential. I just don't have the attention span to set every position up on a board. Yeah. And like I see the solution before I have really thoroughly analyzed it. So it's mixed for me. I love buying chess books, but I haven't really been able to get so much value from them yet.
I think you've got a lot of company from people listening. I mean, I love buying chess books and I love reading them, but to your point from earlier, like doing deliberate practice with them is like another step higher that I struggle with. I read them mainly for enjoyment, which there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not optimized if that's your goal. So how long was your commute, Sam, from Umeå, Sweden? So I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, to Stockholm, which I can pronounce.
Yeah, so it was a weekly commute. So basically I would fly down on Monday, and then I would have like 4 nights without family. And that's when I practiced chess. Okay. And then I would fly back on Thursday or Friday. Yeah.
Okay. That's a lot of time, and yeah, as I say in my book, quantity is the best quality. So even if you're misspending that time, misspending a lot of time is better than properly allocating a small amount. With the visualization work, with the replaying of games as you're sort of going to bed and stuff, it's very evocative of Queen's Gambit, by the way. The replaying of master games. Was that something, because a lot of times when I interview adult learners, what I've discovered is people who started competitive chess beyond their teenage years in particular, and especially beyond the age of 25, one of the biggest struggles is getting to sort of internalize the chessboard and visualize the board naturally. And I think the kind of work you're describing, where you do conscious work on picturing the board in your head rather than just solving puzzles of a position that's in front of you. I've said before and written that I think that's some of the best highest ROI work that you can do. So was that in particular a conscious decision on your part, or was it, again, just something where you liked the master games and you wanted to internalize them and it just happens that it might have helped you a lot?
No, I think it was mostly driven by, like, I had these chess books, but I couldn't follow the lines in my head. And then they're just useless unless I set up a board and like do everything, they're just useless. So, and I was also kind of, I guess, I was thinking about going to a club and playing, tournament games. And I was a little embarrassed that it wasn't second nature to me, like the notation of moves. And that felt like kind of a baseline that I had to have in order to even, go to a tournament and write down my moves and like discuss the game afterwards with everyone else. So I tried like a few tools, like where you need to guess. You need to click on the square. It says like E4 and you need to click on the square. I didn't think they helped a lot. So then I tried this. And suddenly it just clicked. Yeah, I guess that's it. And that's one part. And the other part is just I'm a big fan of, these scientific approaches to learning. And they really revolve around creating situations where you can test yourself and get feedback on whether you're right or wrong. And then you can see that you have made progress. So a lot of my frustration with chess is that you don't notice that you're getting better, and probably you aren't getting better. But you don't really feel that now I learned something. And that's the attraction of the spaced repetition in Chessable, for example. You can really feel that, okay, maybe I have just memorized a lot of useless opening lines, but I have learned something, like I have improved. And that's the same thing here. I would see that the first time I tried to recollect the game, I couldn't. And then the second time I could. And then after 3 or 4 times, I could do it in my head. And then, the day after, I still remember the game. So I have tangibly learned something. And I think that's really important, both for motivation and also I think that's how the brain works, that you actually learn something. And you have this game always in your memory from now on. So when I would go into a new opening variant that I didn't know, instead of I'm out of book, I would just think, well, in Carlsen's game, didn't he have a similar thing where he moved the bishop here? And that would at least give me ideas.
That's really cool. And do you feel Sam, you have an unusually good memory?
I've always been good at learning things. I've always been better at, tests than assignments because I'm kind of lazy, but I have a pretty good memory.
Okay. And how many games do you think how many games do you have memorized, do you think? To this day?
And not many, basically only the ones that I memorized during that period, which was, maybe 20.
Okay. Yeah, that's not Magnus level. It's just absolutely amazing, as you alluded to.
And I've probably forgotten most of them now because I don't regularly review.
I was wondering about that too, because I could learn them, but I would forget them if I weren't regularly reviewing them. And Sam, you were speaking about measurement, and it made me think of a blog post you wrote. You had a really interesting post about this sort of dangers of rating, and you referenced something I had not heard before called Goodhart's Law. Could you enlighten me and our listeners as to what Goodhart's Law is?
Sure. So that's the idea that whenever you have a metric that you have as a target, then it ceases to be useful as a metric.
Right, because you're solving for the metric rather than the skill.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that really applies to grading in chess. Because, the purpose of rating in chess is to match you against equal opponents. It's not, this perfect measure of whether you're actually getting better. And one of the big things that I'm trying to solve with Noctie is to overcome rating anxiety. So I felt and I know that a lot of people share this sentiment because you get these forum posts and stuff. Everyone's used to be 1200, but now I'm just on a losing streak and I'm down to 900. Should I quit chess? And those kind of things are really psychologically, you're focusing on completely the wrong thing. So that's one conscious decision. A design decision with Noctie is to have people still want this rating system as a progression, but you shouldn't be afraid to lose rating because your true chess skill isn't decreasing. So you should never be scared to resign a game or to play a move that you're not certain about, because that's a learning opportunity. So one of my big things with that blog post was that I think that you should try to adopt the mindset that whenever you lose significant amounts of rating, that's good, because that's just a reset of difficulty. And that's what you do in computer games all the time. You make the players reset because
that's a good point. Wow, I never thought of that.
Yeah, they get to experience this journey again, and you get this mix. Okay, you played against tough opposition, but now you get to prove that you can capitalize on lower rated players and so on. And I think that as soon as you turn this rating loss into a boon, something that can help you in your improvement, then you will cease to be afraid of it. And then you won't do these suboptimal decisions for your learning. For example, the most clear one, I think, is that people want to memorize a lot of opening theory because they're afraid to lose games in the opening. And that really maybe steals some focus from perhaps you should be playing a lot of opening positions that you're not familiar with. in order to kind of get a broader experience of middle games and so on, and in order to find all the weaknesses in your opening game, rather than making sure that you're not losing the game in the opening.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And overall, I found the blog post highly worth reading, and really like the framing about like losing rating is a good thing. And I hadn't thought about that idea of like restarting a level in a video game. It also calls to mind sports. Like, you know, if a team makes the championship and they lose, you often have, like, I'm a big NBA fan, and you often have these sort of rites of passage, you know, where a younger star comes up in the league and needs to sort of lose a couple times to the established stars. And it's happening right now with Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The Oklahoma City is probably going to win the championship. But then they have to climb the whole way back up to get to that same point. But then this time, they're armed with additional knowledge and have learned from their prior mistakes. So yeah, that's a brilliant insight. And it ties into what you're doing with Noctie, because one of the first features you offer is it will give you a rating based on how you play against the bots. But then you also use these sort of like, I would call them titles, but they're more like levels, like named levels. Is that part of why you decided to do that?
Sure. So we started with kind of just making this rating test so I'm going off a bit on a tangent, but people have this skepticism against playing against computers. And I felt that playing against Noctie is not like playing other computers. It really feels human and it really feels fun. So I wanted to get a lot of people to just test that and see what feedback I got. So the first thing that I made was just a rating test where you play a full game against AI, and then it uses AI to tell you your rating, because I know that people love doing tests, you know, IQ tests or like random personality tests and so on. So it was kind of a good way to get exposure to a lot of people trying AI. So, and then since people like this so much, we kind of built on that in the product that, okay, it seems like people really like this rating estimation. We need to keep it somehow in the app. But at the same time, we want to avoid this rating anxiety. And we want to avoid, you know, one thing with using the AI to estimate your skill level is that if you change the difficulty of the AI all the time based on how you're playing, that gets a bit messy. So that's why we have this kind of hybrid system where you first use the rating estimation both as a fun thing and to kind of calibrate your level to our rating system. But then you have kind of this linear progression in terms of when you play Noctie on, you know, bishop 4, then Noctie plays like a 1700, and then when you beat that level, and especially if you play really good moves, then you get kind of bonus rating points representing that your true skill level has increased, and then you unlock the next difficulty of Noctie and so on.
Yeah,
that's actually one thing that I just asked our users for feedback is. We noticed that we have this button kind of hidden on the profile page, which is reset progress. And when you do that, you get to take the rating test again and restart. And a lot of people are using that. Like we just added it as kind of a fallback, but a lot of people are using that. And that ties into this thing that I've asked people, and they have kind of plateaued in their progression, and they just want to reset and start from a lower level and start beating Noctie again and so on.
Yeah, I could see that would be appealing. Also, like you get a new number, you know, maybe you'll have a good day when you take the test a particular time. And without getting too deeply into the weeds for non-computer engineer, non-computer scientists like myself, like what do you do to make it play more like humans? Because obviously that's something a lot of chess sites have been working on for a long time.
Sure. So it's really based, and my idea for making this really starts at that point, like rather than I'm solving this problem. I had obviously a big problem with my own chess learning, but it's also I'm thinking all the time about AI. So when AlphaZero came around, that was really interesting to me. And like many other people, I found that AlphaZero, you know, plays in a kind of more human-like way. It's superhuman, but it's still, you know, more human-like than Stockfish, etc. So I started thinking about what if instead of training an AI on, you know, self-play, games against itself, you would train it instead on human games? Can we get this really intuition about how players at different levels play? And that gets you Like I started doing that, and that gets you maybe half the way. But then you have all these remaining issues, like strange blunders that you make and not calculating in the right situations and so on. In addition to training custom AI models that know how people at different rating levels play, on top of that, I built an algorithm based on kind of my own intuition about how I, as a chess player, think. Like, when do I stop to think? How far do I think before I'm satisfied that I'm going to play this move? In which situations will I instantly reply, and in which ones will I not do that? So on top of these models, we have this custom-made algorithm that basically emulates those aspects, including time taken for a move. Because that's one like jarring thing when playing against computers is they will play moves instantly that you shouldn't play instantly. Like moves that require calculation, it just feels really off when computers play them fast.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's a really important insight that I hadn't thought about prior to. I can't remember if I read it on your blog or saw it in another interview, but yeah, that really resonated with me. And I've always been like, people often ask me, like, is it good to practice against computers? And I always say, if you can take it seriously, yes. But I personally can't take it seriously. And I think that's part of the reason why, is there is this inhuman feel to, like, they immediately play some like tactical knockout, you know, that should take 10 minutes to see. And yeah, so that's a really good insight. And in terms of finding the game, Sam, did you use ChessBase Megabase or the Lichess database? How were you able to train it on all these human games?
The Lichess database.
Yeah, it's such an amazing resource. It's incredible. And we
a lot of people have a lot of projects to thank Lichess for.
Yeah, for sure. And we had a listener question. This is from Roy Lopes. Thank you for helping to support Perpetual Chess, Roy. And he says, beyond brute force calculation and current neural network architectures, what fundamentally new AI paradigms or algorithms could lead to the next major leap in chess engine strength?
So I think one thing, like, I'm not the most qualified person in the world to answer the question, but I do have quite some understanding about like the frontiers of chess AI. And I think one thing that's missing, you have this positional pattern recognition from neural networks, and then you have the brute force calculations of Stockfish. And then, like, in newer versions of Stockfish, you have kind of a combination where the evaluation function is actually based on neural networks. What's not really there is, well, if you think about the progress that's been made in language, for example, large language models, you have these thinking modes where they kind of think about symbols, and then they go back, and then they reevaluate, and then finally they output something. So I think one thing that's missing in terms of chess engine architecture that could take it to the next level is to kind of integrate that process into the model. So if you have this, let's say, big neural network that can actually, just like a human, like take this search that the engine does and then kind of condense the information, like, okay, this variation looks promising, but there is this issue down the line, and take that knowledge and kind of integrate it into the pattern recognition in the current position. I'm not sure that would lead to higher ELO because it's really pushing it, but it could definitely lead to a lot more ELO quality per compute or per calculation. And that's something that I think would be really cool. Just, you know, this engine that thinks smart all the way, including calculating variation, not just thinks intuitively smart in the position and then uses brute force.
That's interesting. And do you think engines are going to just continue to get stronger and stronger? Do you think they'll slow down at some point?
I think there's a lot of
wow, that's incredible
potential.
Just amazing. And in terms of your sort of Noctie origin story, I mean, you mentioned you were already interested in chess and you were really struck by what DeepMind did with AlphaZero. Was that really what like set you on this whole path?
It's always easy to like construct a story from, but I mean, going back to my childhood, that was the first real exposure I had to AI. I've read this book about how they built.
Yeah, like age 10, you said, right?
Yeah.
It's incredible. Who reads a book about chess and computers at age 10?
It's more like a biography. I mean, it's more like, it's not super deep into the
it was like the Kasparov versus Deep Blue match report book, I think.
Yeah, and like with the insight from IBM of how they had to make these custom hardware, like things to make it calculate faster, and all these new techniques that they discovered on the way. That one was like, that one might have been, I've always had since then a fascination with building systems that can kind of emulate intelligence. And I mean, now that's on everyone's mind.
Yeah.
But that's always been like, when I was learning to drive a car, I was thinking about something that would look at like how I was doing and give me feedback on, my driving. I've always been thinking about how can we build systems that emulate human intelligence and use that to help humans. And that's, I think, for me, is ideologically and like philosophically very important, is that we need to build AI systems that help humans with our learning and our creativity and all this strength that we have as humans, rather than replace us.
Do you worry about, like, obviously it's a big hot button topic. Do you worry about the direction that machine learning is taking and the sort of, machines taking over the humans narratives?
I do. Like, I know it's a controversial subject with people. Some people can't just wait for the utopia to arrive, and other people are really fatalistic. I do think that a lot of the big players in AI are, too focused perhaps on, replacing a lot of jobs that are perfectly fine jobs for humans to do. Like, really get the sentiment that you want to replace all this manual labor that people get. They need to stop working early because their bodies can't take it anymore, and so on. But I think a lot of the things that we do best as humans, like creative writing and so on, I don't really understand except for the economics, I don't really understand the ideological motivation for trying to replace humans in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's a daunting time. Yeah, it's a bit scary in that sense. And chess, of course, historically, getting back to your interest in Deep Blue, when it beat Kasparov, a lot of people sort of look at it as this like canary in the coal mine, historic exemplar of what was coming in terms of AI and bigger subjects than chess. And obviously, ever since then, AlphaZero being another sort of leading indicator of what was to come in terms of machine learning. Do you feel like there's still use cases with chess that are going to be like ahead of the curve of broader AI learning? Because my sort of layman's perspective is that AI broadly is catching up with chess and AI.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, I think that chess was a perfect testing ground for AI. I think in a sense, those who care about bringing AI forward were kind of done after AlphaZero.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, DeepMind has done a few things after that related to chess, mostly related to explainability, understanding why the neural network evaluates chess positions, so and so. But I think as a whole, like, except that Stockfish can play at a really amazing level, it doesn't really bring any new insights into the AI area as a whole. So I think the frontier has kind of moved on beyond chess. So I don't really foresee. Obviously, there is a big thing that hasn't been done yet, which is kind of integrating large language models with chess engines in a sense that would make them properly understand and explain chess. That's, I think, something that a lot of people are working on. But I don't really foresee automatic big improvements in that area because a lot of the right people aren't focusing on solving that problem.
You mean a lot of like the most talented computer engineers? Yeah, but I mean, as someone who interviews a lot of website proprietors, and, in addition to amateurs, and it is something a lot of people are working on. So it'll be interesting to see. And my friend Jen Shahadi recently wrote first of all, Nate Silver wrote a blog post about why, now these are particularly language learning models, not necessarily game trained, like engines for chess and I guess poker bots, you would call it. But anyway, so Nate Silver wrote a post that's worth reading about why ChatGPT is terrible at poker, which was interesting, where it couldn't even generate fake hands because it was just kind of like generating these word salads of like the most frequently used words in describing a hand and like wasn't even keeping track of the chip counts correctly. And when they asked it to generate some hands, and this inspired my friend Jen Shahadi to try to play chess with ChatGPT. So again, this is not playing with an engine. This is playing with the learning language model. And she wrote a post about it that was really funny because it would try to cheat. It would basically try to gaslight her in certain positions and play like illegal moves. And she would say, no, that's an illegal move. And then it would try to play it anyway. So why do you think it is that these language models are not necessarily able to compete with humans in games or even play fairly the way that the specifically trained computer programs can?
Sure. So there's several parts to that. One part is that I think these models are really great at fuzzy stuff where you don't have to be exact. The major labs have really struggled to make them perform well in these, math benchmarks and so on, because it doesn't come naturally. Being rigorous and exact doesn't come naturally to this. I think they're like one analogy might be like they are mostly working on intuition. So you could probably host a podcast almost without thinking. Like you don't need to really, because you've done it so many times, but what comes out will be kind of a word salad, but you can still do it because you can just use these really fast parts of your brain that can automatically generate language. And that's what I think these language models are doing as well. And they don't stop to check their output against rules. And in order to make them do that, you have to do these really crazy things where have you seen these like reasoning outputs? Like whenever they do these reasoning steps, they output this intermediate reasoning and they're like, no, I need to go back and check that. But wait, and they go on and on and on and on and waste so many tokens just to make like a basic sanity check of their own output because they're so inexact, like in their nature. And that's obviously a problem for chess.
So you don't think they're that close, basically, to figuring it out?
No. And the other thing is that these models struggle, like all neural networks, they struggle in out-of-distribution situations. And chess is basically almost entirely, except for the opening phase, it's almost entirely out of distribution. So it's not the same data that they have been trained on. So when you play with a language model, chess, they tend to play pretty well, at least for the first 15, 20 moves. Like they tend to not make illegal moves. They tend to use reasonable openings and so on, because that's much more similar to what they have seen, because they have still seen all this text, PGM text on the internet. Okay. I do think some people underestimate. Some people are saying they're not just outputting the next token. But I think there's been pretty good studies on what kind of internal representation does these language models have of games such as chess. And at least for some other game like Othello, I guess, it's been shown that they actually have this mental model of the game where they're actually updating where the pieces are and so on. And I think that's happening as well for chess, but to a much lesser extent because they don't have that training data and they aren't really built for that purpose.
And are you using the large language models much for your programming work?
Sure. It depends really on what kind of work I'm doing. I find that they excel at doing what's called, greenfield work, which is, I'm spinning up a new project. I'm not, making a change to a large existing code base, but I'm just creating something new, especially if you make something that you can throw away. So let's say that you need to make an internal tool to run tournaments between different Noctie levels and collect the results and visualize them in a web platform so that you can speed up your, AI development. That kind of thing, they are amazing.
That's incredible. That's a huge undertaking.
Yeah. So that would maybe take me, let's say, 2 weeks normally. And now it takes me 1 day at most to make that kind of project. But then you try to use them to just make changes to your code base, and they create more issues than they help you. So in those cases, working existing code base, I think to a large extent, it's just fancy autocomplete. It does help with some basic things like rewriting a function to change something, but it's not really there yet in terms of replacing a software engineer.
Okay. Yeah, it's amazing and scary, as we said earlier.
Just general thing I thought about also in terms of these people trying to make, large language models understand chess and so on. I mean, that's a really popular request for Noctie. Can the AI explain things? And some of the other players are doing stuff like that. I think one important kind of design principle for Noctie is that we're not trying to do something that the AI isn't ready to do. So I think in general, it can cause a lot of issues when you over-rely on these kind of AI models and try to generate explanations when the model isn't quite there.
Yeah. So do you think that it will get there in like 10 years? It's just too early, or do you think it
will get there? It will get there. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Samuel, this has been fascinating. Really appreciate your taking the time to do this. I'm also curious, like, obviously you had a really good job. You've, have a very promising career regardless of what you do, but I'm curious 3 years in how the business of Noctie is doing as a chess startup.
It's, the future is looking brighter. Whenever you make a startup, there's a lot of ups and downs. I think we have kind of passed a threshold in the sense that we have gotten so much feedback that people think this is valuable enough to pay for it, which is proven by, the actual results. And the word is kind of starting to spread. I mean, the big challenge for consumer apps is always getting the word out and, getting a share of people's attention. Because even people who download your app, they forget it. They don't come back the next day and so on. But I feel that we have recently kind of crossed the threshold in terms of more people are finding out about Noctie without kind of us doing anything. And they are proving kind of the value with engagement and sometimes even supporting us. So it's starting to approach the stage where I would say it's a viable business. It's still not quite there, but it's getting close.
That's reassuring to hear. And we should say, for any listeners curious, it's a partially free pay model. Basically, like the rating test that we alluded to, you can go and do that for free, and you can play a certain number of games against the bots for free. But then at a certain point, it's in order to do more, you would need to pay for a membership, which of course helps support the whole endeavor and ensure that.
You can actually keep playing games, but with some features disabled. So you have a limited number of just playing games against AI, getting your rating and so on. But these things like instant feedback, being able to select the opening you play, playing some of our custom built lessons and so on, those things are limited unless you become a supporter.
Okay. And if you don't mind my asking, did you receive any outside funding for your company?
Yes.
Okay. And how big is your team?
We're 3 people right now, full time. So it's me and my co-founder, Daniel, who has been working on it for 3 years. And then we just got a new guy to our team who's helping us really with community building and creating a lot of custom chess content for Noctie.
Awesome. And are you guys all Sweden based or all over the place?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Well, it's fascinating. I mean, it's a really cool site, and we should stress app as well. I only use the website. I haven't checked out the app, which I should do. But
it's mostly it's the same.
Yeah. Well, Samuel, this has been fascinating. So you mentioned your sort of love-hate or eyes bigger than your stomach relationship with chess books that we can all relate to. Before we go, do you have any favorite chess books that stand out to you, or any other favorite like chess YouTubers that you just watch for fun?
Sure. So in terms of chess books, I think that the one I mentioned, Silman's Endgame course, was really the most accessible, really, especially like if you have this short attention span, and also because it doesn't do what a lot of chess books, of the best chess books. Right now I'm reading, for example, the Cheryshev Endgame book. And like one issue there is that the answer is revealed. And that's for me, it's like I need to have this kind of sheet of paper to block out the variations. But that's one thing I really liked about the Silman book, that it was kind of just easy to work with. As for chess YouTubers, etc., I have 2 kids now as well. I don't have so much time to spend on chess YouTube. My favorite is probably Jerry, Chess Network.
Yeah.
Just for casual, it's not for learning. I just love, when he's following Magnus Carlsen in these bullet tournaments, etc. Just think it's a it's really cozy listening to that.
And how old are your kids?
One is 7 months and one is 4 years.
Wow, so busy time. Well, on that note, we should let you get back to it, but really appreciate your taking the time. It's a really fun site to check out, NoctieAI. So Samuel, keep up the good work, and thanks for popping in.
Thank you, Ben.